Hey everyone, welcome to episode 74. Today we will be talking with Troy Lambert. Now, this will be a little bit of a different approach. It's kind of related to, I believe it was episode 36, where I spoke with Joanna Penn, who is an author and a very creative person. So Troy came to me to talk about a platform or a piece of software called Plottr. Plottr is, I thought anyway, simply for authors to plan their books and all this kind of thing, of which I have tried myself. But Troy had the very clever idea that Plottr can actually be used with artists and as a creative, and I can't wait to explore that. We did chat a little bit, and I'm really on board with listening more. Troy, welcome to the show. Please tell us who you are, first of all, who you are, and then why you think Plottr is for creative people and artists and comic book people.
Oh man, so first of all, I'm Troy Lambert. I'm an author of over 30 books. I'm the education lead for Plottr. That's probably about all you need to know about me as far as that is concerned. But I have worked with a lot of different people for organizing different methods of creativity using Plottr. And part of that is because Plottr, it really has two main elements. And the first one is basically a timeline, which if you think of a corkboard with note cards, only digital and on steroids, because you can do all kinds of things with those digital note cards that you obviously can't do with paper note cards. So that's a part of it. And that can be used to organize all kinds of things, and I'll talk about that in a minute as well. And then we have sections for characters and notes and places to keep your research all in one place. So when you were talking to me about sketch cards, one of the first things I thought of is a set of sketch cards could be an overall project. Well, I would just call it a project. I don't know if that's the artist name for it, or maybe you have something else, or a deck of scene cards, or whatever you want to call it, right? And so within that, you've perhaps created certain illustrations, certain characters, and you have plans to create more of them within that same world, deck, realm, whatever the case may be, whether or not you're telling a story. Now, if you're telling a story, obviously Plottr has all kinds of applications for that. But even if you're not telling a story, just the ability to track your characters, the illustrations that you've associated with that character, and a lot of that through like digital tagging and things like that. Like you can just keep your ideas and your world around that art very organized. And you can add photos to Plottr in the different scene cards and stuff. So you could literally put the photo there, put all the digital tags you wanted in it, like your typical metadata type thing that you would do. And it would help you just track and keep your project part of it organized. So that's one aspect of it.
That sounds really good. Projects can get really complicated, especially when you have maybe different characters for each image, or even if it's just images. I could easily see that with each set. You kind of want to tell a story anyway, even if it's just visual, even if it's like, I don't know, say bicycles or something. Well, you would want different kinds of bicycles. Maybe you would want to go from point A to point B with that. So I guess you could take different corkboard things and move them around for that, I suppose, and then add your images and create your story before you actually create the set. Would that work? I think we have a delay.
Yeah, for sure. You could organize the illustrations and stuff like that. But do we have a delay?
I think there's a bit of a delay.
Are we back?
I'll just pause this for a second.
There we go. All right, beautiful. Okay, so yes. So, what I was kind of saying, the other aspect of that you could do with scene cards. So, of course, that your adding them in as a story, because you're kind of telling a story anyway. I tell people a picture is worth 1,000 words if there's a story behind the picture. But if it's just a picture, then there's not, and usually there is some kind of depth there. And I mean, I'm sure you know this as an artist. Every artist that I've met has a vision with the things that they're creating, and that vision itself is a story. That vision itself tells me something that's more in depth about that photo. It's rarely ever that they present a piece of art or a picture and they're just like, this is just a beautiful picture. There's usually something behind it. But the other aspect is if you are doing stories like comics or graphic novels or something like that, or even just a series of scene cards about like your friend who loves to kill rabbits, which, hey, it's a hobby. Everybody's got to have one, right? It's okay. No judgment here. No judgment. But, if it's stories about killing rabbits or about the different characters that are within that world, that is all something that you can track using Plottr and basically just keep organized. The beauty of it also is that it's very visual. So if you think about, like, why do we use whiteboards and corkboards and stuff like that and not just draw something on a piece of paper? And the reason is we need a bigger visual representation so we can get a bigger picture of what we're doing.
For you.
And Plottr just allows you to do that digitally. It's really, really useful in that way.
Okay, so how would you approach it? What makes Plottr different from something else, like maybe Scrivener or something like that?
So I tried using Scrivener to plot a long time ago, before Plottr even existed, actually, which is another part of the story. And part of the reason it didn't work for me is that visually, it's not. I can't personalize it, and it's not as appealing. The biggest thing with Plottr is you can change colors, you can change fonts, you can change how things are arranged, whatever you want to do to make it so that it works for you. So inevitably, when I'm talking to other writers or other people who are using Plottr, they always show me something sometimes that I didn't really ever think of doing with it, because it's so versatile. So probably the biggest plus for creatives and artists is that you can personalize pretty much everything about it, and you can use the things that work for you, and the things that don't work for you, skip them. Just don't use them. You don't have to use every part of the tool.
As a visual person, I can certainly appreciate being able to tweak it and all that stuff. I have a Mac. I've been a Mac user now for just 2.5 years, I think. Before that, I was a Windows user. And you get all these cool little nifty free apps with the Mac and stuff like that, but you can't really make it, you like to, when you're when you're creating a new set or trying to come up with ideas for things or whatever, you kind of like to be inspired. And to be inspired, usually it's by looking at something. So if you can set it up with the colors that make you happy or creative or whatever, I could certainly appreciate the appeal in that.
Oh yeah, even just things that relate to your project. And like, I'm a big Mac user. I used to work for Apple, but like, they even came out with this new. It's kind of like a mind mapping software that they added as a free app. And here's the thing. And if Tim Cook's listening, no offense, dude, but I hate it. Okay, because it just doesn't. It doesn't allow me to do the things I want to do to make it work for me. So, I mean, that being said, hey, Plottr isn't for everyone, but if you are a visual thinker, which many artists and creatives are, it is so useful. And because the way I bought it, literally, I walked into, and before it had hardly any of the features it has now. I walked into a writer's conference. A friend of mine was walking out of the dealer's room where they had vendors that were selling stuff for authors. And he said, you have to buy this software. And I said, I do? Because I'm not really good at doing what I'm told. It's just not really my thing. And, but anyway, so I walked in and I looked at the software and I bought it within 5 minutes. I was like, this is it. The demo was well under 5 minutes, and I was like, this is going to change the way I do things. And it has, because it allows me to do things I couldn't do before. which make my process more efficient and keep me more organized and keep me more focused and on track. And I can't stress enough how valuable that was for me, you know. So yeah.
The way you use it as an author who writes only, or do you use it as someone who uses words and images? How do you use it?
I primarily use it for words. Now, I still use images because I will have images of my characters, for example, or images of the settings where I'm writing, and actually photos from different angles. And sometimes, if it's possible, I'll go to the setting where I'm going to write the book, if at all possible. And I will actually take tons and tons of photos. I am a reasonably decent photographer. I'm not going to ever make a living at it, but I'm reasonably decent, so I can capture what it is that I need as far as to capture the feeling of the place and the emotion that it makes me feel. And then I pull those things into Plottr to help me when I am creating writing wise. It helps to visualize and to be able to see what it is that I'm describing, if that's at all possible. So whenever possible, I try to make that happen. So I use images to inspire words, I guess is the way I should put that.
Yeah. So. Does Plottr have a really big learning curve to it? Will it take like weeks to learn it, or?
No. And that's one of the big advantages that it had over Scrivener. Like you can be using it as far as the basic features within half an hour. You'll figure it out. Probably less. We have video tutorials. If you're looking for something specific, we have video tutorials all over the place that'll basically, in a matter of a few minutes, they walk you through exactly what you need to know to do that part of it. So yeah, it's really quick as far as the learning curve. Now there's some advanced features that it might take you a little longer to figure out how to use them, but I just tell people, how important is that? Not terribly important. I mean, you'll learn those as you go. It's kind of like people, well, like, oh, you have all these advanced features, I should learn to use them all. I'm like, you don't use all the features in Word, in Microsoft Word. Most of them you don't even know they exist. You don't look at them.
You'll learn it if you need to, and then you go on Google and how do you do blah blah blah, and then
exactly.
Learn what you need.
And our same thing. Go on our website, go on our YouTube channel. If you need to do something specific, we have a video that shows you how to do it, or we have documentation that tells you how to do it. But if you don't need it, relax. Just use it the way that it works for you. Because what I always tell people, the most important moment with any software or anything that you do really is when you start out, when you're a beginner, you copy what someone else is doing.
Yep.
Right? Because you're not going to reinvent the wheel. You're going to say, this guy has a process, I'm going to follow his process. But at some point in that process, you have what I call the and then moment. The and then moment is the moment when you say, I took his process and you tell me how you made it your own. So people will be like, can I imitate your writing process? Sure, go ahead, because you're not actually going to imitate it. I know that at some point you're going to go, and then I did this. And it's going to change for you because it's going to be the way that it works for you and your brain and your process. So.
Yeah. What kind of media can you bring other media besides pictures into Plottr?
I think right now it's just pictures. I've never tried to bring video in, because what I will do with that instead is if I have a video or like something that's extremely large, like a map or whatever, that I don't want to bring into Plottr, I just link. You can add links, so I just link to it in a like a Google Drive or a Dropbox folder, whatever the case may be. Or if I have like a series of pictures, I don't want to bring them all in, I'll just link them in there. So I have a note and I have the link that goes straight to what I want, but I don't bring all of that media into Plottr. You could. There's not really limits. Like there's not really a limit to how much you can bring in, but I haven't tested that to see like how many I can actually bring in, how many pictures I can actually bring in. Usually if I have a lot in a gallery, I'll just have a link to a drive folder where I have them anyway, and I can kind of view them as a slideshow or whatever.
I suppose that would work, although note to Plottr, if you're listening, little preview images of photos could be handy. Sometimes maybe you're looking at a whole board, and you're thinking, okay, here's point A and I need to get to point F, and then after that, so you have your little images. I'm sure you can bring, like you said, you can bring images in, but if you have a lot, well, it would be nice just to have at least little previews.
Yeah, it would. I think you could bring in thumbnails, and then when you hover over scene cards, you would see them. When you're in the hover section, when you basically move your mouse over and hover over it, you would see those images.
Oh, okay.
So you could do that. You could do that. I have not, but I can easily see how you could.
Okay.
So it's. I think there's actually all kinds of ways, because you can enter photos into scene cards in the description section. There's rich text features. You can do bold out, all that type of stuff, but you can enter links or photos. And I could imagine easily where you could have a series of scene cards and photos in each one, and that would make it actually pretty easy for you to see what you have going on each one. It'd be interesting. Well, I'd love to see somebody do it.
I haven't tried Plottr yet. So do you? Well, speaking of which, do you have like free trials?
Yeah, there's a 14-day free trial, and then there's a 30-day money-back guarantee. If you try it and you're like, I hate it, I just always tell people, tell us why you hated it, so that we can fix that, hopefully. But we want to be, basically, my biggest thing is I want to set up creators for success. So I want this to be a tool that enhances your process, doesn't distract from it, and doesn't make it harder. I want to make it easier. Okay. So one of my goals always, like most of our features, and the other thing is, if you'd like to see a feature, like we have a public roadmap, you go on there, tell us, I would really like to see this. And we say, yeah, sure, that's cool. Or, maybe that's down the line, or maybe it is something hard to do, and it's going to take us a while to figure that out. Not by us, I mean developers that are not me. But the Plottr team, it's going to take them a while to figure that out or whatever. But 90% or greater of our features have come from suggestions from users.
Okay.
So if you as an artist go on there and you say, man, it'd be really useful to have this, and this would make it really much better for me as an artist, I would say, put that on the roadmap and hit the developers up or email support and say, hey, this is something really cool that I think would help artists, and I'd really like to see it. And we will consider it. If it's something, sometimes it's an easy change that I don't understand that it's an easy change. I ask them something, I go, oh, we'll just throw that in with a new update. I don't know how that happens. I don't write code, I write words, but they make it happen. So.
Well, I'm somebody who's forever trying the new thing to organize my things together. Like I'm a huge fan of the old paper, except that it's kind of difficult to erase and replace and things like that. Which iPad for the win. But even the apps on there, it's nice if it would be for me, and I think I'm speaking for a few people in our audience. Well, a lot of people like the good old just draw it out first, Mm-hmm. But I think I can speak for people saying that it would be really nice to have all the handy stuff in one place. And
yeah,
as someone, I like to try. I've tried, Good Notes, Notes on Apple Notes and stuff, which is actually pretty cool. I gotta say, for a little app, it's not that bad. You can put a lot of stuff in there, but it's difficult to see it all. And it would be handy if you could organize chapters or maybe series sets, because what I do sets. So you have a series 1, 2, 3, and then where do you go from 1? Where do you go from 1 to 2? Where do you go from 2 to 3? And is that the end of it? Do you move on to something else? And then within that, plan from your visual beginning to the visual end, which reminds me, you had mentioned that you had someone who had taken part in NaNoWriMo.
Mm-hmm. We did.
NaNoWriMo, for those of you who don't know, that's something every November where you write 50,000 words. Now, that's 50,000 words. So how an artist actually managed to make it work, that's beyond me. I don't explain how she did.
So basically what she did was, obviously, for the most part, graphic novels are not actually 50,000 words. there are a lot of pictures. There are a lot of, picture panels. And so because she's the artist and the writer, she counted her pictures as words. So depending upon the complexity of the picture, she would count them. She'd say, if I spend an hour on this picture, that's 1,000 words. I count that as 1,000 words. And so in some ways she was measuring her, so obviously she had some words, but she was measuring her productivity as a part of Nano with the goal of getting this graphic novel, this particular section of it that she was working on done during November. But she was counting her pictures as words and then still using Plottr to organize. Here are the words, and this is the panel. Here's the words, this is the panel, to make sure that the story hung together the way a story should. So even though it's a graphic novel, it's still a story. So she was just using it to structure the story, but also to track her progress throughout Nano and to say, this picture counts as this much, this picture counts as this much. And she was able to be really successful at getting, first of all, getting her whole thing done, but also at motivating herself by using that as a motivation instead of saying, well, I'm not writing words. And I said, well, who cares if you're writing words? Count your pictures. And she went, oh, okay. And it worked out beautifully. And we actually, so we had a pre-Nano event where she planned it. And then throughout Nano, we had accountability days where we basically showed up and said, hey, did you do what you're supposed to do, this week? How'd that go? Stuff like that. And she was there at every meeting and really, really excited about the way that the whole process helped her to complete that project. So it was really fun, and it was fascinating for me to watch as a writer, watching an artist finding a way to use that program and Plottr at the same time to complete her project. It was amazing.
That's really incredible. I'd actually be really interested to go see that project if it's still up there, just to see how she actually did it. So she actually used NaNoWriMo as the, how would you say, the engine to get it done, and then used Plottr to organize her story. Well, that's really clever. Do you have any, for instance, sample projects that an artist could go look at to see how they could make it work for them?
I don't think we have any sample projects specifically for artists, but that inspires me to create one, probably.
And speaking as someone who likes to try new things all the time, I find very often it's really helpful to see it first and to see how you see somebody else. As you were saying, you copy first and then it can be really useful to see, for instance, just how would you use it to write a book? Well, then how would you use it to organize a series of paintings, for instance? Because as you said, each painting has a story behind it. How could I use a program like Plottr to plot my story for an exhibition, or to plot the images for my trading card set? How can I tell a particular story? Like I'm working on, well, it's pretty much finished, too late now, but I will be doing series 2. How could I plot my series 2 with dragons? How can I make it work within that little set? Because there are a lot of different moving parts with different types of media that are used for that. How could I organize it together for that?
That's actually really interesting, and it would be so within Plottr there are plot templates, but they are geared obviously towards writing and story plots. But some of them are pretty simple in a way that I think you could probably adapt them to a card series. The other thing that Plottr has is as a part of that series Bible aspect of being able to track your characters and places, you can put more than one book in Plottr at one time. So under the project tab, you could put set 1, set 2, set 3, and each of them could have its own timeline, but you would be able to go through and compare those all in one file. That's another thing that might be useful. I mean, I'm really, some of the stuff I'm just talking off the top of my head, thinking through how you could use this for art type things. But when you said an exhibition, I was like, yeah, I'd love that, because often you put things in a certain order that represent, years ago I was in the...
I'm sorry, please go ahead.
Oh no, I was just going to say years ago I was actually in the museum world, but I worked in a mining museum, and part of our exhibition strategy was each exhibition told a story of some sort. Like there, it wasn't ever just here's some cool stuff to look at. Instead, everything had its own story, and I could see how you could use that in, and a lot of that was visual, but I can see how you could easily use that in the art realm. Use Plottr to plan that out and to see, because the ability to digitally move those cards really easily allows you the freedom to go, this doesn't actually belong here, it belongs over here, and this belongs over here. And you can move that without obviously picking up a painting and moving it. Instead you can be doing that digitally. That would I could see how that would be really, really handy. Um, so talking to you has kind of opened my eyes to some different ways that you could probably use Plottr as an artist that I hadn't thought of.
A lot of museums, when you go to a museum, the whole point of the exhibition is to tell a story, and you have to start at the entrance and then go through the exhibition. And ideally, you learn something along the way. You don't always, but the idea is that you do. But that would also include a lot of media, kind of like trading card sets. Sketch cards are uniquely on small small cards and things, but nonetheless, they do incorporate ideas within each card. So I'm thinking it kind of all relates in a way. You're going from point A to point B, whether you're in a museum or in an exhibition or to just showing your family trip or something. It just being able.
For sure.
I'm sorry, I do ramble a little bit. All those ideas are just going. But when you're working for instance, with the sketch cards, sets, or working with different companies, because if we're working for one company, we're usually working for 3 at the same time. Well, then you could have folders actually and keep track of all your projects that you have within one folder, and you have your little mini folders, I suppose.
Yeah, you could easily do that. I mean, I've used a Plottr for project planning too, of like tracking my email list, things that I'm doing or stuff like that. But I often come back to that everything we do is story, because we as human beings are addicted to story.
Yeah.
That's a good addiction to have. And there are different ways that people express that addiction to story. Some people read tons of books. Some people create books like me. Some people create art. Some people watch lots of movies. Some people play video games to develop their own stories, whatever the case may be. But we as human beings are addicted to story. So when you're talking about sketch cards or any kind of art, it all generally comes back to story. And Plottr is a story organization kind of software. I wanted to call it story management software, but SMS is taken by somebody. I don't know. So anyway.
Well, this is actually really, really interesting, because I will admit, going into this, I was a little skeptical. How can you use? Because I've used Scrivener lots and lots and lots of times, and then similar things, and Plottr just sounded pretty much like that. But in essence, it isn't. It is something that pretty much can use. And when you mention video games, well, I don't play very many, but nearly everybody I know does. They're all telling me about the cool story behind here or stuff like that. So I would guess that something like Plottr would be really ideal for pretty much anybody.
There's so many different ways that you can, like I tell people, when you're organizing your life, you're planning your own story. What's my story going to look like next week? Right? And that you're planning your schedule. You're planning your own story. It all comes back to your story and what you want your story to look like. And so for me, and I'm just addicted. I'm addicted to story. I'm addicted to story structure. I'm addicted to all of it. I'm here for all of it. So whenever I hear artists talking about a different way to tell stories, or a video game designer talking about a different way to tell stories, or somebody running a D&D campaign, in a tabletop game and telling a story that way, right? For me, all of that is just an expression of our human need to tell ourselves stories, and in some cases to use those stories to escape the mundane lives that many of us live. So just love it.
What do you think? How do you think Plottr is going to evolve in the future?
So I always we're adding new features and new ideas. We're developing a nonfiction mode that's more geared towards nonfiction writers. And obviously, for obvious reasons, is that although Plottr has been fiction focused, a lot of nonfiction writers have used it. I've used it to write my own nonfiction because, again, nonfiction is a story. It's a different kind of story, but it's a story. It's still all a story. So we're moving towards those type of things. We're integrating new stuff all the time, new plot templates, better ways to like import media, better ways to manage just simple evolutions of the software that need to happen as we go forward.
Can you share, like if you're a part of a team or something, can you share a project together?
So you can. There's two versions of Plottr. One is an offline version, which is just it's an app you download to your computer. Now, if somebody else has Plottr, you can send them a Plottr file and they can open it. Right, the typical thing. But we do have a collaborative web app version that's called Plottr Pro, and that's what I use. And the reason is you can collaborate with somebody on the same project at the same time, kind of like Google Docs. If you're both typing in the doc, you can see each other doing that. It's the same thing. You can do it the exact same way in
It's
Plottr.
like a Google Docs. It's like being in a dentist office to me. It's just,
I hate Google Docs. It
works, but it's just
it works, but I don't even know how to describe why I don't like it so much.
It's cool. There's no friendliness in there.
Yeah, the UI is very just very not. It's very plain. It's very plain. It's kind of like I use Scrivener to write. Like I plan in Plottr, I use Scrivener to write, but I think the UI of Scrivener could use a really hefty update myself.
That is really interesting what you said there. You use Plottr to plan, but you use Scrivener to write. Like
yeah,
I have used Scrivener a lot in the past, and it's great to write because it's better than Word, frankly, in my opinion.
Oh, it's better than Word for a number of reasons, and the reason I use Scrivener for fiction is because I do a lot of technical writing and editing in Word, and so I only fiction write in Scrivener because it's a brain trick. When I open Scrivener, my brain knows what we're doing. We're fiction writing. It's totally psychological. I love how powerful that program is. I wish they would update the user interface a little bit and make it a little more modern.
The only thing you can do is change the colors or the covers of your folders. I think you can do that. Well, I haven't used it for a little while now because
you can do that. It's not really that, like, to me, I'm like, it's a lot of work to do that, and it really doesn't it doesn't make like a huge difference in my experience. You know what I mean? Like if I'm going to take the time to do that, I want something that like has an impact. And I'm like, I look at it when I do all that work and I'm like, that wasn't really worth it. That was a nice distraction.
But to get back to that point that you made, that you use Plottr to plan and Scrivener to write. So I'm imagining that you can use Plottr to write too if you're a writer.
Or you can.
You can. So Plottr, basically, if you really rinse everything down, Plottr is a planner.
Yeah, it's a planning tool. Now you can use it to write because there's not really word limits inside the scene cards, but it would just be messy to like, you're either going to copy and paste that out to something.
Ideally, you write, if you're writing, you would write somewhere else and then bring it into Plottr to say, well, okay, that's done or whatever.
Right. So you can so the way I do it is, and this is probably speaking more to the writing process, but it might apply to an artist process as well. I plan first. So I plan what I think I'm going to write. Now, obviously, what I write doesn't always turn out the same as what I planned, right? So during the writing process, each day when I'm done writing for that day, I summarize what I wrote that day in Plottr. Yeah. Right next to what I planned to write, just on a separate plot line, I write what I actually wrote. And then when I get down to the revision process, I basically use it to check my work. I can say, okay, how did I do? Did I stay on track? How did I do? What did this look like? and what do I need to change to make this actually work? And then I make those changes, and that's, in this editing process. So that's my process, is I use it for all three phases of writing, the planning, the writing itself, and the revision process.
But I could easily see that for people like me, the planner thing would be much more useful as Plottr would simply be much more useful as a planner, but not just your regular like Moleskine planner or something, which I do like.
Yeah.
But something that you can actually, navigate and manipulate and dress up and play with. Getting back to my co-host again, just because this kind of, I find, actually makes me think of her a lot, because she has the killer rabbits, but she also has a bee set, which plays with words. So that would work with a little bit it's actually very funny, her bee set, because it's very much a play on words. So all of her bees have a particular character. So that could very easily be tracked. Could we say tracked? And then if she wanted to expand on that, she could expand on that visually within Plottr. Would that work?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Oh, yeah. Easily. That would be, I think that would be a really fun project, and it would be probably really easy to because all you need for that is the basics of Plottr. If you can open and create a scene card and add a photo, you're good. That's like, and that's one of the most basic starting points, right? So if you can do that, then you can create exactly what you're talking about that would work for her.
So that would work for me then. For my dragons, I have 3 characters in there, and those are 3 characters I'd like to take along and see what happens with them. So I could actually create a little. All right, okay, I'm on board.
Yeah, same thing. You can, and like I say, that's in really the most basic, essential part of Plottr. You could do that easily with. You could probably fool around with it for 10, 20 minutes, and you would figure out how to do that.
Okay, so how could you take an idea like that and then how could Plottr help me expand that again? Because seeing as we don't have any like pre-made templates to show us how that would work, can you explain to me how I could take an idea of, say, 3 visual characters that belong on 2.5 by 3.5 inch cards, and how could I expand those 3 characters through to a next set, say?
So the way I would do it if I had 3 characters, is I would basically go in and create 3 different plot lines, which are the little lines that go across the screen. I create 3 different ones, one for each character, and then I would create scene cards or scenes along the way that were basically, this is what I want to do with that character next, this is what I want to do with this character next, this is what I want to do with this character next. And then you could include in the description in that scene, you could include an image, whether you want to include a rough planning image, that's just your quick sketch. That's like, this is what I'm going to flesh out. Because I'm assuming there's some part of that process that you just have the pencil sketch that says, this is my idea.
For somebody like me, and probably Lindsey too, so that would probably include a number of people. You're going along by sketches. You want to plan out your project. You usually do some short sketches, and you would go along by that. So I could probably take like images from my phone, I suppose, or something, and just drop them into the Plottr. So, okay, for that character, this is what I might like him to look like in the next
in the next
part,
set, or the next scene, or the next card, or whatever, however you wanted to do that. And you could just take those rough sketches and put them in there, and then you could, when you're in the actual process of creating that, you could bring that up, look at that, do your thing, to flesh it out, and then you could upload the final into Plottr, so you can see what happened from your sketch to your final. Like, that
could be interesting, because then you could have your finished project. You could have that, so you could actually see it, and then see, well, no, I don't like the way that turned out, or I like the way that turned out, and then carry that on into the next one. Well,
So there's some really, I think there's some really cool things that you could do that would basically help you spark your creativity and to keep yourself, but at the same time, keep yourself on track.
Yeah.
One of the biggest things I say is, I'm a big plot structure fan and story structure fan. And the reason is creativity needs structure. It doesn't need limits. And I'm not saying limits. So people confuse structure with limits. Limits that's not the same thing, but it needs structure. And the reason it needs structure is if you want someone who is not you to look at it and understand what you were trying to mean by what you were doing, it needs some kind of a structure that they can relate to. And that adding that structure to creativity for me, first of all, it makes me better as a storyteller, but it also enhances my creativity. I know where I need to be. I'm in this comfortable space. I'm not wandering around out in the wilderness not knowing what I'm doing. For me, that structure provides a certain amount of comfort. Not limits, structure.
You have no idea how much you hit the nail on the head with that one. When you're sitting and you're like, oh, I don't know where to go here. I'm completely lost. I'm overwhelmed, So.
Mm-hmm. And that turns into block, yes. Artist block, writer's block, whatever you want to call it. And that comes from us not knowing where we're going and not knowing what's next. And that structure just gives you that hint of, this is where I'm going. I'm okay. I know where I'm going. I always use it like I could start at my house and go, I want to go to the East Coast, right? That's a really broad destination, right? I don't know where I'm going to end up. I don't know what route I'm going to take. I don't know if I'm going to be happy when I get there because I may have had a terrible journey. I may have had a good journey. You know what I mean? And I may arrive at a destination. I'm like, oh, this is wonderful. I like it. I may arrive somewhere and go, why am I in Maine in the winter? This is really dumb, right? Right? So having that plan for your journey just makes it more likely you're going to arrive somewhere where you want to be. That's all structure is. It's just a plan. Okay. Anyway.
You have pretty much convinced me to at least give it a try. Again, like I said, I was very much a skeptic when we started this. But I'd be on board with giving this a try. Where can people go to? Well, you're an author. If they would like to check out your books, where can they go to take a look at Plottr?
Yeah. So for me, just my website's the easiest place to start. It's troylambertwrites.com. And then for Plottr, it's just plottr.com, Plottr without the E. And that's the easiest place to start. You can find us on plottr.com. You can find us on YouTube. You can find us on Facebook, all the different places. We have actually a really active Facebook group where people ask questions, other people answer them, all that kind of stuff. Mainly because there's around Plottr is not only just Plottr, the software, but there's just a community of people who use it and who are very friendly and help each other out. And, we just, like I say, I'm focused on creators having success, whatever that looks like for you.
All right. Well, that's fantastic. I'm going to get all those links from you and they'll be in the show notes below. I have actually learned something. And
I'm glad.
I feel a little relieved. I would like to try it. And again, because I like to try all the shiny things and see if they work and if they don't work. And so I'd like to try it. I think I'm going to give it a go. So I'll report back and say if I liked it or if I didn't. Is there any last words you would like to say before we go?
I would just say, here's my primary thing is try Plottr, try whatever you want to try, but try things that make your creative journey successful, whatever that looks like. Your story deserves to be told, and it deserves to be heard.
Well, that's inspiring. I can't wait to get back to work now. Thank you so much for having come on. This has been a real pleasure. I'd love to have you back on sometime if ever you have some updates or news that you'd like to share with the community.
You bet.
It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
Bye, Troy.